You'd think coming home after 23 years would feel familiar, but instead, Slovakia feels like a foreign country to me. I was born and raised in Slovakia, and at the age of 18, I decided to move to the UK to experience an adventure and learn English and become very good and fluent at it, and then return home and possibly become a translator or explore other fields where English can be used. I studied at the pedagogical high school where I became a qualified nursery teacher, and I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher and be around children and educate the next generation. But at the age of 18, I wasn't ready to take it to the next level, go to university and become a qualified primary or high school teacher. Therefore, I decided that what the right thing for me was at that time was to move to the UK and learn how to speak English and hopefully find friends along the way and experience exciting things that England had to offer. So I was 18 and that was 23 years ago. I met my husband, Ashley, about 12 years after that, so quite a long time after I moved to the UK initially. And I met him in church. He was the music director in that church, and we played in the same band and we had lots of fun together. We became very good, very close friends. And we actually got married in 2016. We got married in Slovakia, the east side of Slovakia. It's a town called Trebišov near Košice, which is a big city. And he fell in love with the country. He fell in love with the culture and the food and how people live here. So we would always make sure that we'll come and visit Slovakia 2-3 times a year, see my family, spend time with them, explore a bit of Slovakia, and each year he loved it more and more. And when COVID hit and my grandmother fell very sick, her house became abandoned and no one really spent any time here or took care of it, and we decided to invest in the renovation and just have a house here so we can spend some time in the summer instead of being in my parents' flat, which is a very small flat. So, and after refurbishment, we fell in love with the house, and because COVID allowed us to work online, we're both music teachers and we continue to teach online. We decided that maybe being in Slovakia is not a bad thing. We can actually be closer to my family and I could get to know them all over again and celebrate their birthdays and our birthdays together and just rekindle that relationship. So here we are now in Slovakia. It's been just over 2 years and I'm finding certain things quite challenging. Being a Slovak, living abroad for so many years, I find certain things very challenging. It almost feels like it's a reverse culture shock. So the first culture shock was me leaving Slovakia, moving to the UK and realizing that a lot of the things were very different. The way of life, traditions, just from the smallest things like how people greet each other, interact with each other, to what they eat, how they spend time together, what type of opportunities they have compared to Slovaks. So a lot of it was a huge culture shock. But because I was so young and quite immature, never really lived outside of my parents' house or flat, I found everything quite overwhelming and big. But because I was so young, I also adapted very quickly, and I don't think it took me that long to fit in. And just being around diverse cultures and different nationalities and people with different life stories and backgrounds and cultures and traditions and races, being all in one place, mingling together, getting to know each other's cultures and learning so much about the world through people's cultures was such a fascinating thing for me. I could be in a house of a Filipino person one day, and the next day I'm in a Indian culture, and the third day I could be in African culture, eating their food, listening to their music. Then the following day I could be with Americans. It was just so much fun, and it opened my eyes to so many things. And also I was so grateful that I had the opportunity to be exposed to such a diverse life, which I would have never experienced in Slovakia. I must admit, a lot of things have already changed and progressed in Slovakia from the cultural point of view, but it's not hugely different to how it was before I left. So I thought that moving back to Slovakia would be easy peasy, because surely I know my culture very well, even though I haven't lived here for so long. It's going to be super easy. I didn't even think of the fact that a lot of my friends moved on, or they're just not in my life, so they probably wouldn't have time for me, or that would have problems organizing things, and or even knowing where to shop, when to do things, and how to do things, how to travel. The whole system, travel system is different. Obviously, coming from the UK, they drive on the opposite side, so it's just, I still have a problem which side to turn to as I'm crossing the road. So it's all these small things that I only realised when I moved here that are very different to the UK. I'm not saying one is right and the other one is wrong, but it's just different. So it was an interesting experience. I never knew that reverse culture shock can actually be a thing. In terms of manners, Slovaks are way more direct, and they don't mince their words. They say it as it is, and sometimes it can sound a little bit abrupt or rude or harsh, but that's just how they are. Whereas British people are way more polite. They go into great extent to apologize and be super, super polite. And even if they want to tell you something that might be a little bit hurtful, they say it in such a polite manner that afterwards you still feel like, oh, that was very kind of them to say that, even though they maybe criticized you, but it's just the way they said it that made you feel like they actually care about you. Whereas in Slovakia, it's very direct. In terms of shopping experience, even small things like when you pay with cash and you get your change back, they don't place it in your hand. They actually put your change on a counter or a little tray, and then you have to take it. So that's a small thing, but it's very different because I always expect them to put it in my hands, but they just put it down. And I find that a little bit rude as well, but I know it's not, it's just different. So even things like this can be a little bit challenging sometimes. Like I'm just going like that with my hand, and they don't know what to do either. And then public transport, I mean, it's not as top-notch as in the UK. Mainly because we live in a village at the moment, so the bus service is not very frequent, and right now we don't drive, we don't have a car because we're still adjusting, and we will get one eventually, hopefully this year. But it's just knowing, what to expect from drivers, and they can be driving very wildly here. At least that's my experience with the bus drivers. And they don't really care whether you're sitting or still walking. They just start driving, and or they let you miss the stop, that kind of thing. So it's really interesting. Mostly it's a nice experience, but the bus drivers can be very grumpy here. And they're not very kind sometimes, the way they answer. when I ask for something and I don't understand it and I ask them to repeat it because my hearing is not great, they can be a little bit miserable. So just things like that. And of course in the UK, where I lived in London with Ashley, we had regular buses and trains. We had the underground. Every 2-3 minutes we have a new underground or train or bus come in. So we had all these options. So here it's a matter of waiting for a very long time for the next bus, sometimes 2 hours. So that's a very long time. One thing I really like about the Slovak transport here, even though most Slovaks complain about it, but the buses do come on time, sometimes 2 minutes early, 3 minutes early, but usually they bang on time, and you arrive to your destination on time as well. Whereas in the UK, because of lots of traffic, constant traffic, and being stuck in traffic sometimes for half an hour, this doesn't really happen here because Slovakia is not overpopulated. So even though Slovaks tend to complain, oh, I was stuck in traffic, for them being stuck means like being there for 5 minutes, and they get really annoyed about that. But I guess they never experienced being in a big city in a different country like London, where being stuck for 1 hour is pretty normal. So we don't get that here, so that's quite nice. The bus service is very reliable, and the train service, so you do get to your destination on time. And be sure that if they say that the bus arrives at 10, it will be there at 10 or maybe even 2 minutes early. So that's a bonus. It's really good. So let's talk about friendships and social circles, at least what we've noticed so far. I'm still not quite sure how Slovaks form friendships. It just feels a little bit slow here. It's like everyone's living a very kind of independent life. So once you have your husband or wife and children or your immediate family, you tend to spend most of your time with them, which is great, or your cousins and sort of extended family. But in terms of friendships, I think what I find really challenging here is that the people who I reached out to, 99% they just don't have time. Maybe because I'm not their immediate family, or I've not been in their lives for many, many years. They do know me, we used to get on, we were good friends. But it just seems like the people I reached out to, who I considered friends and, nice people, they're just really busy with their families, and they don't have time for friendships. Maybe they do. Maybe they just have their own friends and they're not looking to form new friendships. Maybe they just feel like, well, I've got family here, so it should be okay. Maybe I just need to be more patient with them and with myself and allow friendships to just happen naturally. I understand that being in a small village and not having a car is probably a little bit challenging, and we can't just be in different places in a short space of time because we depend on public transport. But at the same time, I just felt like making friends and forming friendships in the UK was so much easier. I could literally just become very close to someone after meeting them 3-4 times, or meeting them in church or at work, and then we'll just go for a drink, or we'll just have a nice meal together, or I'll invite them to my house for a nice meal, so they can get to know my husband. It was just a little bit more natural and quicker, and I feel like in the UK people make time for friends, whereas in Slovakia I feel like the family is the most important part of their lives, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just comparing the two. I feel like, yeah, Slovaks like to just hold on to 1 or 2 friends, but there's this distance that I'm feeling. It's not as immediate, oh, come to my house, or let's go for a coffee so we can get to know each other a bit better. In England it was so much easier. And the bonus was that there were so many cultures and we got to know so many different interesting people. whereas Slovaks tend to be very rigid and always the same. Some might be a little bit friendlier, some might be more open, extroverted, introverted. That's not an issue. But in terms of how they behave, their kind of patterns of behavior are very much the same. So we're still struggling in this area, and I can't seem to find a friend here. And it's not that I'm not trying. I'm trying. I'm trying to reach out to people, text them, or just if I see someone I don't know, hadn't seen for years and years or decades, I hug them, which is quite a natural thing in England. We would hug a lot. Whereas here it's just like, hello, here's my handshake. I find it so cold. And I thought that English people were quite reserved and cold, but actually coming here, I find it to be the opposite. Yeah, Ashley still struggles to know who to shake hands with and who to hug. We're natural huggers. We just hug our friends, or even people who we don't know too well. We would still hug them just to make them feel warm and comfortable. Whereas here, everyone's very stiff and very rigid, and they just offer their hand, and it just feels really formal. At least that's what I find. I find it very formal. And this kind of, 2 kisses on the cheek. Sometimes you don't even touch the person. That's how you kiss. It's bizarre. Whereas in England, there's usually one kiss, but usually there's a hug as well. So hug comes first and then a kiss. Or no kiss and just a hug for a very long time. You're hugging your friends or people who you know well. So that's interesting. In terms of family relationships, like I said, people are very close to their families, which is lovely. They stick together, they do lots of things together. Grandparents with their grandchildren, or even great-grandparents. And a lot of them still live together as well. So you would see 3-4 generations in one house that has different levels, and they all live on a different level. So that's very nice. It's usually in villages, really, not so much in towns and cities. But they do look out for each other, and they do lots of things together. They take care of them very well, especially the elderly parents or grandparents. So I like that tradition. It's still there, it's very strong. So in terms of the language barrier, it's a really interesting topic for me, because I thought coming here would be easy, because I've always spoken Slovak, I've always communicated in my language, because of that relationship I have with my parents. So even though I lived in the UK, I would still talk to my parents on a weekly basis, and my brother, who actually lives in Ghana in Africa, and so I would use Slovak mainly when communicating with my family, because most of my friends were English speaking friends. So I always thought coming back would be easy peasy in terms of the language. Of course I can speak my own language, but actually coming back and trying to use the official language, for example, when I need to sort out my bills or make phone calls to Social Security or health insurance, or sort out my phone bill or other bills, I quickly realized that I didn't have the vocabulary, and that's mainly because I actually never worked in Slovakia. I never even had to go through an interview in Slovakia. I never had to open a bank account. I never had to pay any bills. So the vocabulary was missing. So I would say the first year of being here was incredibly challenging, because I found myself speaking like a 5-year-old when I phoned these companies or I had to email them. My words were so basic and so childlike. It was embarrassing. And there were times when I would just I had a stutter, I couldn't get my words out, and I actually sounded like I was like mentally ill speaking to them. So I had to apologize and explain that I'm actually from abroad trying to adapt, to the Slovak way of doing things, and I'm still struggling to find the right words. So that was interesting. So I can't even imagine how Ashley must feel right now, being in Slovakia as a complete foreigner, not knowing the language or learning the language from scratch, and not being able to do anything for himself here yet. Although the plan is to get him into our local shop and ask for things by himself for the first time. So hopefully one of the videos will be on this topic. In terms of whether I feel judged by Slovaks for being too British or not Slovak enough, I don't really think that's the case. They actually compliment me a lot. They say, "Oh, don't worry, your Slovak is great. You sound just fine, and honestly, we're so pleased you didn't lose it. You still speak like a native Slovak." So most of the time I do have a positive experience. It's not so much about what others do to make me feel like an outsider. It's just actually not being prepared mentally for all those little nuances and all the things that I will be feeling or going through or experiencing or having to deal with or process emotionally. I truly wasn't ready or prepared for it, and that's why it's not so much what others do to me to make me feel this way. It's really about me readapting to my own culture. In fact, I'm going to do some research on this and find out if others feel the same way when they return home to their home country. Do I think that I will ever feel fully at home again? I think so, but I believe it will take a bit longer than I thought. I think that with a bit more patience and being kind to myself and not sort of telling myself that there's something wrong with me, which we often do as human beings. We always blame ourselves for certain outcomes. And like I said, it's nothing to do with what Slovaks do to me. They're lovely people. They just do things differently to people in the UK. And because the United Kingdom is full of foreigners and all sorts of cultures, the vibe is so different there as well. And the relationships are very different because it's like such a huge blend of different cultures. Whereas in Slovakia, it's very steady. It's always the same. There's a pattern that people follow without them knowing. And I think once I get used to that pattern and the way of living and their traditions and how not to be offended about their directness, it's nothing to do with what people are doing, and it's nothing to do with what I'm doing. I'm coming as an outsider back to my country, and I think I just need to be a bit more patient and not take things personally when things don't go my way or people don't respond the way I would respond to them, and just giving them that grace to be who they are and understand why they behave the way they behave. So far, these have been my key realizations and experiences after 23 years of living abroad and coming back to Slovakia to spend time with family and get to know my culture all over again. So the really frustrating bit about grocery shopping is that the cashier, when they scan your products, they'll scan all the products as quickly as possible, and you don't have any time to pack it, or they don't even help you with your packing. They expect you to just shove it back in the trolley, pay for your shopping really quickly so they can move on to the next customer, and be sure that the customers that are behind you are very impatient, and they really show it by just the way they breathe or they look at you. You feel that tension. So even if you do try and pack part of your shopping, they make it very obvious that you shouldn't be doing that, that you should be taking your trolley to the packing area where you can take your time and do it there. So I find it really, really frustrating because in England, the cashier will not only help you to pack, but they'll take their time and they'll wait for you to be ready for the next item, or they'll just do few items very quickly and then they'll help you pack it and allow you to really pack the whole shopping, pay for your shopping, and you can go straight to your car or go home with it. Whereas in Slovakia, it's the opposite. It's almost like you're redoing your own shopping again because you put it in your basket, then you had to take it out to scan it, and then you put it back in a basket, and then you have to pack it. So I find that super frustrating. It almost feels like I'm doing double the work when I shouldn't be. So there you have it. I poured out my heart. I do believe that things will get easier as I give it some time, as I patiently wait for friendships to form, as we fully integrate and understand how the culture works. I hope this video resonated with someone who might have experienced reverse culture shock or struggled with feeling foreign in your own country. And feel free to write in the comments which countries you returned from and how it felt for you to return to your own country. I would love to hear from you. Keep in touch with me. Bye for now and see you next time.